Hi everyone, and welcome back to Docking Bay 81. This is our first full-length video, and we're going to be talking about The Rise of Skywalker. I'm just going to be giving my review here of the movie, what I thought of it, what I thought worked, what didn't work, but this is a non-spoiler video. For those of you that haven't seen the movie yet, I'm going to talk a little bit about the highlights of the film. I'm just going to talk about what worked well, what didn't. We'll do another video after this one where we talk about the movie from start to finish, and I'm going to go over like pretty much everything, and what I liked, what I didn't like, what I wanted them to do differently, which wasn't a lot. This movie was actually very well done. So I've actually seen the movie 3 times now. Yes, I saw it 3 times opening weekend. I'm sure you are shocked by this. Got a pretty good understanding now, I think, of the film. Each time I went, I was looking for different things and picked out different things on each different viewing. So I've got a pretty good feel for the film at this point and feel like I can kind of give you a good comprehensive review here and give you my thoughts and feelings on the movie overall. So let's get down to it. The Rise of Skywalker and what I thought. Honestly, I loved it. Odds are I was going to love it anyways, but no. I really, really loved this movie. I thought with everything that J.J. Abrams essentially had to wrap up and clean up after the events of The Last Jedi was not so well received by most of the fan base at large. I know it's a very divisive movie, and it's pretty much 50-50 as whether or not you loved it or hate it. J.J. Abrams had a huge undertaking with this movie to appease the fan base at large and make this work, and at the same time put an ending to one of the greatest stories of our lifetime with the whole Skywalker family saga, which was not going to be an easy task. There was an interview I read recently with J.J. Abrams talking about one of the things that they were having a hard time hitting on was they just didn't feel like they had the ending right. And that as they were going through the movie and they were working on everything else, one of the things they kept coming back to and working on was the ending, and they just didn't feel right to them until somebody finally pointed out to them, it doesn't feel like it's an ending because at heart you don't want this to end. Like, you want to be able to keep the door open to keep continuing the story, which wasn't what the goal was here. The goal was to essentially close the book on the story of the Skywalkers. And once they came to that realization that, no, you're right, we don't want this to end, and we're writing it in a way to keep it ambiguous so that it doesn't really end, we have to come up with a pretty close to definitive ending here. They were able to finally zero in on what they needed to do and make that work. And so continuing off of that, let's start off with everything that did work in this movie. I thought one of the biggest things that helped this movie that was very much lacking in the previous 2 was the character dynamic between Rey, Poe, and Finn. We essentially brought back the Heroes 3 from the original trilogy with Luke, Han, and Leia, and actually having those characters put into situations together where they could play off of each other made such a big difference this time around. We had a little bit of that with Rey and Finn in The Force Awakens. Finn also was able to develop a relationship with Poe, but for the most part, they're all separated. Especially in The Last Jedi. Everybody goes off in their own separate ways and does their own separate thing. Rey is off doing her thing with Luke Skywalker. Finn and Rose go off and do their own thing together. Poe then gets stranded on the Star Cruiser for the rest of the movie with pretty much nothing to do. And because the point of this movie was to teach Poe a lesson, we're going to piss him off by purposely not telling him what the plan was. So this time around in Rise of Skywalker, all of them are together and go off on an adventure together, and it's a complete change of pace. It brings a whole new level and dynamic to the performances of these characters that just wasn't there before. This one, they're riffing off each other, they're making fun of each other, they're, having arguments. Like, it actually felt like a real friendship, a real dynamic. There was that tension there, and there's that lighthearted, ribbing. It felt more natural to have these 3 together and doing their thing. We also bring back Chewie and C-3PO. Now, C-3PO has been largely missing from episodes 7 and 8. I would almost define his roles in those previous movies as cameo, because he really does nothing other than just kind of stand in the corner and give an occasional one-liner. This movie, C-3PO is back, and I mean back in a way like Empire Strikes Back. Every scene he's in, he's adding something to it. Comedy relief, he's got something witty to interject, bumbling or falling around, getting knocked over. At one point, I'm just sitting there going, man, I didn't realize how much I miss C-3PO. Even though he's been in the movies, he just largely wasn't present. And again, that's because we've all been separated and our main characters have been in 3 different directions doing 8 different things. But now that we've got the band back together, everyone is again playing off of each other, and it's such a stronger team dynamic. It really just makes the movie that much better. This movie actually felt like a Star Wars movie. And I say that because The Last Jedi felt so much not like a Star Wars movie. I'm trying not too hard to rag on The Last Jedi because, like I said, I know a lot of people really liked it. I'm in the middle as far as that goes. Like, I liked it, but there was so much about that I would have done differently. But now going back and watching The Last Jedi after watching The Rise of Skywalker, the movies work well together. J.J. Abrams did a good job of honoring what was established and what Rian Johnson brought to the table in The Last Jedi. He didn't undo anything, but more or less gave things a little more clarification, which is what you needed in the 3rd act or 9th act of this story. Things needed to be clarified, questions needed to be answered, everything needed to come to a close. And that's another thing that this movie did very well, all paths coming together. We get a closing to Luke Skywalker's story, we get a closing to Princess Leia's story, we get a little bit more on Poe's background and where he came from and what he did. The story behind Rey and her lineage is fully answered in this movie without giving away anything. Even Kylo Ren, we get a little bit more on him, and his story eventually comes to a very, I think, satisfying close. So we get a very definitive sense of this is the end of the Skywalker story, both with Luke's story, Princess Leia's story, Anakin and Darth Vader's story. Everything comes to a close here, and you ultimately walk away with a sense of finality. But at the same time, as much as they wanted this to be a conclusive ending, there are still things they did to leave the door open for the possibility of Rey, Finn, and Poe coming back to do more adventures later on down the line. Another thing that they did right with this movie was Carrie Fisher. We lost Carrie Fisher a year before The Last Jedi came out. They came out right away and said, hey, we're not going to use CGI like we did in Rogue One. So what they did is they went back and took a look at everything they had in the archives from when they filmed The Force Awakens and realized that we have quite a catalog here of scenes that they filmed that either they didn't use or they used alternate takes of that essentially could be repurposed and inserted into this new movie. So what they did is they took those scenes that they had and they rewrote these new scenes around those to kind of make them work. There's a couple of times it does feel kind of forced. And if you've ever watched any of the deleted scenes or bonus content on some of the Force Awakens Blu-rays and DVDs that came out, you might actually recognize some of these scenes. For the most part, it works so well. It really does. And it actually feels like Carrie Fisher is there and giving her performance, and it feels like she is still was very much a part of that production and the making of this movie, even though she had been gone for 2 to 3 years at this point. And in doing so, it gave us the ability to have Princess Leia's final performance on screen, and it works so well. One of the highlights for the movie for me, the music. Now, John Williams has done exceptionally well in every single Star Wars movie, but for the most part, I've not been as impressed with John Williams' score for the sequel trilogy as I was, say, the prequel trilogy. For the most part, out of Rey's theme and Kylo Ren's theme, not much of the music for the new trilogy has really wowed or impressed me. Nothing really stands out as iconic or memorable. Now, with Rise of Skywalker, I don't think he really introduced any new themes. I don't think they did anything completely different that they hadn't done before, but they incorporated all of the great Star Wars themes from all of the movies, right up through this one. And I think maybe that's what I thought was missing from episodes 7 and 8 was it didn't feel like there was enough of that classic trilogy music really mixed in there. And, they were relying too much on the new stuff that they had come up with. And it's like, no, you've got to use some of this classic stuff because that's the nostalgia. That's what drives the emotion. And a lot of the times that I got emotional during this movie is when that classic Star Wars themes start kicking in. And I think that's what made this soundtrack overall more appealing to me than any of the previous ones had. So now I'm going to get into some of the things that, for me, that didn't work. One of the things that I think hurt this movie the most was its runtime. Hollywood in general has this idea that 2.5 hours is your target runtime, and that if you go anything longer than that, you're losing your audience and it's just too long and you need to cut it down. But I'm going to assume that most of the people listening to this channel are just as big of fans as Avengers Endgame as I was, and can tell you that no, if you do it right, 3 hours is not too long to sit and watch a good action, science fiction, fantasy type movie. As long as your story is engaging and you're moving the narrative, it's okay that it can run a little bit longer. And in this case, I wish it would have. There's a couple times that a lot of scenes could have benefited from maybe just an extra, maybe 30 seconds to 2 minutes of exposition just to pull something out just a little bit longer to give us as an audience a better explanation of what's going on, or a better rationale for why a particular character is making this decision, especially in the beginning of the movie. So you've got 8 movies that came before this worth of storytelling that you need to try to wrap up in this one movie. So you've got to cram a lot in a little time. And so the first, I'll say 15 minutes of this movie or so, it's very fast paced. Cut, go, to get that intro and push it along to set up the story about, here is the adventure that our friends are going to go on to solve this mystery. And I feel like that if you just slow that down just a little bit, giving yourself a little bit extra time for that introduction, and done it in a way that would have captured your audience's attention right away, like, whoa, this is a big deal, then what came next wouldn't have felt so choppy, and it would have made more sense for what was happening. I gotta tell you, I don't like the way the movie started. And this is about the most spoiler thing I'm going to give you. I'm going to try to keep it as simplistic as possible. The opening crawl starts off with a mysterious message was broadcasted through space, received on all channels, of the voice of the Emperor swearing revenge. Why didn't we see that in the movie? Why didn't you show us this? Here's this critical plot point to the movie. The return of, the villain, the guy that's been in the shadows pulling the strings for 9 movies now. Here is his ultimate return. And, oh yeah, by the way, it happened off screen. No. That's important. We should have seen that. Show me, don't tell me. And apparently, though, it did happen and I missed it because I don't play Fortnite. So Fortnite did a event about a week prior to the release of the movie. So you had to log into the game, go to a special section where it's set up like an outdoor movie theater, and they showed a special clip. At some time during this event, either before or after the clip, the Emperor's voice comes across and plays a message. And here's a clip. Here's what played.
At last the work of generations is complete. The great error is corrected. The day of victory is at hand. The day of revenge. The day of the Sith.
So instead of showing this to us in the movie and showing various planets across the galaxy and having people freak out about this, oh my god, what is this? And then having us jump into the movie okay, and now here are heroes and villains, go. We use this as a cross-promotional tool for Fortnite. That definitely not would have been the way I would have gone with that. I'm a big fan of show me, don't tell me. So, when Rey alludes to having a vision that we missed or that was cut so quickly and so jaggedly that we didn't see it with her, for her to explain it later this is why I feel so haunted right now. Well, why didn't we see that? Again, going back to, you just needed another 30 seconds there to really show what was happening for us to get a better understanding of what the character was feeling and what was happening there to understand their motivations better. The special effects and visual effects were on par for these past couple Star Wars movies. It's industrial light and magic. It's not like they're going to, put out crap. They're the best at what they do. There was nothing this time around, though, that made me go, whoa, or, made me, take a moment to pause and go, this is neat. I've never seen this before. In The Phantom Menace, we went underwater on Naboo. In Episode 2, we went to Kamino, which was in the middle of an ocean planet in this floating city. Episode 3, we had a lava planet. Episodes 7, 8, and 9, they introduced us to some new planets, but they were environments that we've been to and seen before. And I know that's been a criticism of a lot of people for these new trilogies, they don't seem like they're exploring or doing anything new. They're just kind of retreading the same ground that we've been on before. So if I had to rate this movie, I'm thinking about an 8.5 out of 10. It's by no means a perfect movie. I think the closest that you get to a perfect Star Wars movie is either The Empire Strikes Back or Rogue One. The Rise of Skywalker is still a very, very good Star Wars movie. Where would I put it as far as like my favorites in the series? I'm not sure yet. I really have to put some more thought on it. I would say it's definitely in the top 5. Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi are always going to be right up there with my two favorites. But yeah, I'm definitely thinking Rise of Skywalker will be considered probably to be one of the better of the Star Wars movies. All right, like I said, I've seen the movie 3 times now, and honestly, I want to go see it another 3 times. I really like this movie. Like I said, I think this is going to end up being one of the better Star Wars movies in the franchise. Not the best, but I think it's going to end up being highly regarded. I really liked this movie. I really liked how it ended. I really liked the character development. I loved the music. To me, it's a Star Wars movie. And it told a great final story for the Skywalker saga. Now, like I said, they did leave some doors open, and they hinted at some things in this movie to potentially build off of for movies later down the road. But those movies aren't going to focus around the Skywalker family. We're going to do something else in a galaxy far, far away, or maybe even go to a different time period in the galaxy far, far away. There's multiple Star Wars projects in development right now. We know what's coming down the line on Disney Plus with the announced Obi-Wan TV series, the Rogue One Cassian Andor prequel series, and we're going to get the final season to Clone Wars coming up soon as well. So we know a few things coming, but as far as feature films, they haven't actually made that announcement yet. I'm very much eager to find out what's coming soon. So hopefully we don't have to wait too long for that. Well, that's going to wrap it up here for me, guys. Thank you for coming back and checking us out. Glad to have you here. Hope to see you back for future episodes. Thanks again to come and check us out here at Docking Bay 81. May the Force be with you.